According to my mom, she works at NASA. The entire class laughed until someone with a badge entered the room and altered the atmosphere. It was a Tuesday, shortly after recess, and the classroom had a subtle scent of hand sanitizer and pencil shavings. Ms. Lawson had just finished roll call when she clapped her hands and announced, "All right, it's time for our What My Parent Does presentations." One after another, students share their stories. A father who worked as a firefighter, a mother employed a local bakery, a brother serving in the army who was acknowledged with a round of applause, even though technically he didn't count. Next came Talia Jefferson's introduction. She rose deliberately, clutching a small index card displaying her name in purple ink. Talia was known as one of the quieter students in class. She was intelligent but preferred not to raise her hand simply to speak. She surveyed the room, making no direct eye contact, and stated distinctly, "My mom works at NASA." A pause followed. Then came quiet chuckles, escalating into laughter, not a sudden outburst, but a wave that grew stronger as confused and amused glances circulated. "Wait, NASA?" Someone called from the rear. "You mean like the space agency?" Another voice whispered, perhaps a little too loudly. Even Ms. Lawson seemed surprised. She didn't laugh. Instead, her eyebrows rose a little, as if she found it difficult to accept. Talia blinked deliberately, remaining silent and still. She didn't shout. She didn't flee. She simply stood, her expression composed, her hands unwavering. "Yes," she confirmed, stating that she works at NASA and is a systems engineer. The word seemed out of place. Ms. Lawson, positioned close to the board, offered a strained smile, signaling a transition to the next item. "Well, thank you, Talia," she said, already looking over her clipboard. Next, it was Owen's turn. Talia resumed her seat, disregarding the laughter and the subtle gestures. Her fingers tightened around the bottom of her shirt. Her expression remained composed, though her cheeks felt flushed. Owen began to discuss his dad's plumbing business, but Talia registered very little of what he said. She was certain they didn't accept her story, not a single one of them, not even the teacher. They found the task unbelievable, but even more so, they doubted the individual presenting it. A girl with deep brown skin, her tight braids secured with a soft pink scrunchie. She carried a hand-me-down backpack with a broken zipper. Her shoes were well worn, and she didn't use elaborate language or speak with great volume. Therefore, when she mentioned NASA, it sounded to them like a fantasy, like a game. During Owen's presentation, a piece of paper was passed to her desk. A boy named Theo leaned towards her and asked if she cleaned the bathrooms or something. Talia remained silent. She didn't cry, not at that moment. As the bell signaled the end of class and students scrambled for their backpacks, she remained seated, her gaze fixed on the classroom door. She had never before wished her mom held a different position, one that was simpler to discuss, one that didn't invite curious glances. Nevertheless, even then, she held onto the conviction that it was important. Her mom had once shared with her that some truths are too profound for limited understanding. One simply allows them to mature. Talia exited that classroom with her head held high, despite a knot in her stomach. She felt no personal shame. Her concern was for those around her. However, she was unaware that the learning experience wasn't complete. This applied to her classmates and to Ms. Lawson as well. The Jefferson House was located close to a peaceful road in Mobile, Alabama. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was neat, painted a light yellow with green shutters. It was the sort of place where the porch light was consistently illuminated before nightfall, and the screen door made a slight creak upon entry. Talia entered through that door at a slower pace than normal. Removing her sneakers, she dropped her backpack close to the staircase and went directly to the kitchen. The aroma of garlic and onions indicated her mom had arrived home earlier than usual. Dr. Renee Jefferson was at the stove, stirring something in a large red pot. She didn't immediately acknowledge her. "You're late," she stated, not unkindly, simply observing it. Talia selected a chair and sat down. "Had to remain behind to clean the desks," she murmured. Renee turned, observed her daughter's expression, and adjusted the flame. Talia remained silent for a moment. Her hands rested in her lap, nervously playing with the sleeves of her hoodie. She appeared eager to speak, but struggled to begin. We laughed, Talia said at last. Renee understood immediately who she meant. She drew out the chair opposite her daughter and sat. There were no outbursts, no displays of shock or fear. Why? I informed them that you were employed at NASA. Renee gave a barely perceptible nod, and they didn't believe you. One kid suggested you might have cleaned the bathrooms. Renee took a shallow breath, a momentary pause to compose herself. And what was your response? You didn't offer one. Ms. Lawson quickly moved on, seemingly avoiding the issue. That action caused Renee's eyebrows to twitch almost imperceptibly, but she maintained a level tone. Do you think you said something incorrect? Talia glanced up sharply. No. Don't accept their lack of understanding as your fault. They laughed, and that's their responsibility, not yours. A moment of silence followed as the bubbling from the pot filled the space. Outside, a dog barked twice and then stopped. You know, Renee said, rising to stir the food again, when I first told people I wanted to work in aerospace, my high school guidance counselor told me to be more realistic. Said I should consider secretarial work. Talia looked up, eyes wide. That occurred in 1998. I didn't engage in an argument with her. I simply ceased visiting her office. Did it cause pain? Renee extinguished the stove and turned to her daughter. Yes, but also ignited a spark. I wasn't feeling anger towards her. I was resolved not to allow her to dictate who I could be. Talia smiled. Just a little. She appreciated that her mom consistently found a way to speak honestly, but not in a sensationalized way. There was resilience in her composure. You know, I could attend your class, Renee mentioned casually. Parent days are this Friday, correct? Talia blinked. You do that? She asked. I get the day off anyway, and it might be fun. Renee replied, but what would you wear? Talia's eyes lit up. Renee grinned. I was thinking maybe my NASA badge and that black blazer you hate. Talia responded, okay, yeah, do that. They both laughed then, a real, from-the-belly kind of laughter. The air in the kitchen felt lighter. Renee served them both bowls of stew and set them on the table. While they ate, she shared stories with Talia about her first job interview and the time she accidentally spilled coffee on a flight simulator keyboard. The stories made Talia giggle, and she no longer felt small. She felt lucky. Remember, Renee said as they finished, you don't owe anyone proof. But if the moment comes when you feel like showing them, just know I've got your back. Talia nodded slowly, cheeks full of food and her badge. Renee smirked that too. She wasn't intending to simply make a statement. She aimed to transform the atmosphere of the room. Talia hadn't realized this yet. Friday arrived sooner than Talia anticipated. Throughout the entire week, rumors continued to circulate within the classroom, much like dust in sunlight. Several students attempted apologies through hesitant gestures. One offered her a crushed fruit snack. Another quietly said, I was just joking. However, the majority behaved as if nothing had occurred. This suited Talia just fine. She hadn't forgotten. As the morning bell signaled the start of the day, the classroom was filled with excited energy. Ms. Lawson had organized the desks in a horseshoe shape, creating space for parents to be seated and present. She wore a purple blouse and had placed a tray of sugar cookies, clearly purchased from a grocery store, as a somewhat feeble attempt to create a celebratory atmosphere. Talia was positioned near the center, her backpack carefully placed beneath her chair. She felt anxious, though not frightened. It was a feeling of anticipation. She had not informed anyone that her mom would be present. The first parents arrived approximately at 9:15. This included a man wearing a mechanic's uniform, a woman in scrubs, and several moms carrying tote bags and Starbucks cups, who greeted with somewhat overenthusiastic smiles and waves. The presentation commenced, punctuated by applause and gentle laughter. One dad shared a story about repairing a sink that had unexpectedly burst. Another mom recounted her experience of teaching yoga to toddlers. Talia repeatedly looked toward the door. Precisely as Ms. Lawson began introducing the subsequent speaker, the door opened. Dr. Renee Jefferson entered the room. She was wearing the black blazer that Talia found so off-putting, perfectly tailored and crisp. Her NASA Johnson Space Center identification badge hung from a Navy lanyard, paired with black slacks and no jewelry except for a silver watch. Her expression was calm, not smug, not flashy, simply present. The room fell silent instantly. Even the air seemed to still. Ms. Lawson stammered, and Talia stood up, announcing, "This is my mom, Dr. Renee Jefferson." The teacher's eyes widened momentarily before a smile spread across their face. "All right, welcome." They gestured. "Would you like to tell us about your work?" Renee responded with a courteous nod. "Certainly. Good morning, everyone. I'm an aerospace systems engineer at NASA. I work on mission planning, flight systems integration, and operation strategy for our lunar and Mars programs." Several heads turned in the direction of Talia. A few mouths dropped open, and one student quietly whispered, "Whoa." Renee proceeded calmly. Her voice had a measured cadence, clear, smooth, and steady. "A significant portion of my work focuses on designing systems that ensure astronauts can travel safely in space. We examine all aspects, from their respiration to the transmission of data back to Earth." She paused, allowing the statement to sink in. "I'm not here to impress you," she added, observing the room. "I came here because my daughter mentioned she's spoken with you, and some of you expressed doubt about my work." Silence. Talia could hear her own heartbeat. She refused to blink. Renee approached the whiteboard and indicated a printed diagram she had prepared, a genuine schematic from a previous project. "You don't need to grasp every detail. That's perfectly acceptable," she stated, addressing the group. "But the next time you hear something that seems unbelievable, pause before dismissing it. Because innovation can emerge unexpectedly," she said, then turned to her daughter. "And when someone shares a truth with conviction, allow it to remain as it is, don't diminish it." Ms. Lawson cleared her throat. "Thank you, Dr. Jefferson. That was very enlightening." Renee smiled and walked over to sit beside Talia, who was trying not to grin. The room proceeded slowly after that. The next parent began their presentation about running a car dealership. There was no laughter, no whispering. And Talia, she sat up straighter than she ever had before. She didn't look around for affirmation. She didn't require it. At that moment, her truth resonated strongly, accessible to all present. However, many failed to recognize that the woman they had just encountered hadn't always experienced being heard. Her journey to NASA encompassed countless instances mirroring this one. Prior to becoming Dr. Renee Jefferson, she was simply Renee Lewis, a slender teenager with oversized glasses and notebooks filled with diagrams that held no interest for anyone else in her neighborhood. Growing up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, she lived in a house with a sagging front porch, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs to pay the bills. From a young age, she preferred machines to makeup. While other girls enjoyed playing jump rope, Renee constructed small devices from discarded fans and obsolete cassette players. Her uncle once described her as odd, but she viewed that as a positive attribute. At 13, she borrowed a book from the public library about space shuttles and devoured it completely in a single night. By 14, she was independently learning fundamental programming concepts. She rarely discussed this at school. She quickly discovered that expressing a desire to work at NASA would often result in ridicule or dismissal. Her educators didn't encourage her. This wasn't due to a lack of intelligence. Renee consistently earned straight A's across all subjects. Instead, they had formed preconceived notions about her future. "You'd be exceptionally organized," one counselor remarked to her. "You'd excel as a receptionist." Upon mentioning her intention to apply to a summer program for young engineers at Georgia Tech, her math teacher expressed surprise. He remarked that it was highly competitive and questioned if she was certain about spending the application fee. Despite this, she submitted her application and was accepted. That summer proved transformative. She found herself among peers who approached problem solving in a similar manner, with notebooks brimming with questions and uninhibited curiosity. She returned with a collection of blueprints and a newfound sense of purpose. College presented its own challenges. At Auburn University, she found herself one of just 3 black women within the entire engineering department. During collaborative assignments, she frequently was asked to record notes rather than work on calculations. Instructors continued to mispronounce her name, even after 3 semesters had passed. Despite these difficulties, she remained steadfast, consistently attending classes. Renee supported herself by working evenings at a diner close to campus and providing tutoring services to high school students on weekends. There were moments when she contemplated abandoning her studies. It wasn't a matter of her inability to manage the workload. The difficulties stemmed from the draining effort of constantly having to demonstrate her place. During one spring, following a successful thermodynamics midterm, she overheard 2 classmates speaking privately behind her. One suggested she must have received assistance, and the other speculated she may have copied from another student. Instead of confronting them, she didn't shed tears. She simply returned home, opened her textbook, and began preparing for the upcoming finals. By the semester's conclusion, she achieved the top rank within her department. It was an unspoken understanding amongst them, but they recognized it. Following graduation, she completed an internship at Lockheed Martin. Subsequently, she submitted an application to NASA, which she considered a long shot. However, her qualifications were undeniable. The acceptance call arrived in March while she was in a laundromat, surrounded by wet towels and with only one dryer operational. Her mother wept on the phone for a full 5 minutes. From there, the substantial effort commenced. The meetings, the designs, the late nights, the subtle glances in conference rooms, the moments where she had to repeat herself 3 times to be heard. But she persisted in voicing her thoughts, because whenever she worked at a console or drafted a fresh concept, she recalled a younger version of herself who only needed one person to believe it was achievable. Now, as she entered her daughter's 5th grade classroom, the badge swaying from her neck, she represented more than just herself. She stood for every girl who had ever been told, "People like you don't do that." However, this wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about establishing something new in her daughter, a foundation that couldn't be undermined. The following Monday, subtle changes were noticeable, not in a dramatic fashion, but through small shifts. The shift was subtle, something you'd only perceive if you were paying close attention. When Talia entered class, she anticipated no special welcome, and none arrived, but the atmosphere felt different. People didn't visibly react when she spoke. Theo didn't whisper. In fact, he completely avoided looking at her. During recess, 2 girls, Kennedy and Samira, approached her near the jungle gym. They stood nearby, uncomfortably, shifting their weight. "My mom said your mom's speech was really something," Kennedy said, chewing her bottom lip. "She seemed intelligent, genuinely so." "She is," Talia answered promptly. Samira concurred. "I researched NASA after school," she explained. "It's quite interesting." That was their brief exchange. Yet they remained. And for the first time all year, the 3 of them settled on the bench and discussed a topic beyond snack trades or slime videos. Later that day, Ms. Lawson spoke privately with Talia as the class prepared to leave. "I wanted to say something," she began, her voice softer than normal. "Regarding last week," Talia looked up, attentive. "I should have managed that situation differently," Ms. Lawson continued. "I ought to have asked more questions rather than proceeding so quickly. I apologize." Talia wasn't certain how to respond. She rarely encountered adults offering apologies in that manner. She nodded once, deliberately. That was sufficient for the present, though not everyone experienced a change of perspective. Certain children still spoke in hushed tones, but they did so with greater discretion. Some observed her with an expectation of failure, seemingly needing her to falter to reaffirm their own perspectives. One boy, Dean, would quietly say NASA kid whenever she passed, as if attempting to diminish her accomplishments. Talia remained composed. She did not react defensively or retreat. Instead, she continued her efforts. She engaged more frequently in class, volunteering answers even when uncertain of the correctness. Now, even making mistakes didn't intimidate her, not as it once had. One afternoon during group work, she overheard a classmate say, "She thinks she's better than us." Talia looked up calmly and replied, "No, I just know I belong here." No further debate followed. At home, Renee observed the change as well. Talia spoke more at dinner. sharing small details about her day without needing to be prompted repeatedly. And she began drawing again, shifting away from cartoons towards diagrams, similar to those her mother created. Rockets, helmets, star maps in pencil. One evening, Renee discovered a post-it note affixed to the fridge. It stated, "I'm going to work there too, love, Talia." She left it untouched for 3 days. However, this wasn't solely about demonstrating assurance. A more profound shift had occurred within Talia. It was no longer a matter of disproving anyone. It was about embracing her own authenticity, recognizing truth regardless of criticism. During gym class, when the teacher requested they write down a goal not related to sports, Talia wrote, "Engineer, space missions just like my mom." When the teacher announced it, there were no laughs. The class simply listened. However, at home, a different feeling arose. It was a still moment shared between mother and daughter, solidifying all they had experienced. It was Friday night again. A full week had passed since Parent Day, and the house was filled with the aroma of Renee's renowned lemon chicken. Talia sat at the kitchen table, sketching a new design, a rotating satellite with solar panels shaped like flower petals. She worked quietly, pausing occasionally to erase or examine an angle. Renee watched from the sink, carefully drying a dish. The focused way her daughter drew, with her tongue slightly pressed against her upper lip, brought back memories of herself at 12, always constructing something in her mind. "Would you like to take a break?" Renee asked softly. Talia looked up. "Almost finished." Renee smiled, resting against the counter. "You've been working on that for 2 hours." Talia replied, "I know, I just wanted to look right." She completed the final line and showed the paper to her mom. Renee approached and examined it closely. "Explain it to me." Talia said, "Well, it's a satellite, but instead of keeping all the panels flat, they open up like this." She demonstrated the shape with her hands. "So it can collect more energy when it turns, depending on the angle of the sun." Renee acknowledged with a nod, clearly impressed. "That's a clever approach. Where did that idea originate?" Talia replied, "I'm not entirely sure. I had been considering sunflowers earlier, observing how they track the sun's movement. The concept simply arose." Renee took a seat next to her, carefully placing the paper on the table. "You know what I appreciate most about that idea?" She inquired. "What?" Renee responded. "You weren't attempting to make a favorable impression. You were simply striving to resolve an issue." Talia glanced at the drawing once more. "Yes, I suppose so." They remained there for a moment in quiet contemplation. A comfortable silence settled. Then Talia spoke again, her voice gentler. "Do you think they truly believed me?" "After you left," Renee placed her hand on the table. "Some did, some still don't. That's not something you can always manage. So what is the solution? You continue to reappear. That's the challenging aspect. Not a single time, but repeatedly. You articulate the truth, even when it seems as though nobody listens." Talia considered that as you did. Renee offered a gentle smile, similar to the one I still offer. "Was it always this difficult for you?" Renee reclined in the chair, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes more so, but I stopped expecting it to become simple." Talia regarded her mother, seeing her not only as a parent, but as an individual. Someone who had overcome obstacles she hadn't even been aware of. Someone who possessed quiet strength without needing external validation. "I used to wish you had a conventional job." Renee laughed, something straightforward to describe. Talia observed her mother's reaction, recognizing the discomfort when people inquired. "Now, I find it quite admirable, truly admirable." Renee reached out and gently tucked one of her daughter's braids behind her ear. "I'm proud of you, she said. Not because of what you said in class, but because you said it anyway." Talia felt a warmth in her chest, not just pride, but relief. A weight she hadn't noticed until it started to lift. "I didn't think you were going to come that day," she admitted. Renee raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" she asked. "I thought maybe you'd think it wasn't worth it." Renee hesitated. Then she moved nearer, speaking with a resolute and unwavering tone. "Anything that impacts your self-perception is always deserving of support." Little needed to be said after that. Talia rose and proceeded to the refrigerator, took a magnet, and attached her artwork directly beside the grocery list. Renee observed her, feeling a sense of quiet contentment. Not every learning experience warranted recognition. Some simply existed, perceptible only to those who had rightfully gained them. There remained one final point to share, not directed at Talia, but for those still discovering what excellence resembles. The following week, during the morning announcements, Ms. Lawson took an unanticipated action. She presented a student submission from the Career Dreams bulletin board and read it aloud to the class. "This one is from Talia Jefferson," she announced. She wrote, "I want to build machines that will reach places no person has ever reached because someone must discover how to get us there, and I believe I can." There was no laughter this time, only silence. Several students turned to observe her, not with incredulity, but with something approaching respect. Talia sat at her desk, serene and concentrated, sketching miniature gears in the borders of her notebook. She didn't require a glance upward, nor did she need the room to applaud. That wasn't the focus, as this narrative was never centered on recognition. It concerned honesty, about maintaining conviction when others expressed doubt, about the significance of speaking clearly, not noisily. However, the individuals in that classroom had observed something unexpected. A woman with qualifications, certainly. Beyond that, she was a woman with a clear sense of self, someone who didn't require authorization to express herself, and a daughter who witnessed her interspaces devoid of faith and yet infused them with strength. Renee didn't need to speak loudly. She didn't need to detail her achievements. Her presence was sufficient. However, it was Talia who bore the burden of that day. She endured the flames of mockery, remained within them, and emerged stronger. It can be challenging to express self-belief, particularly when facing a lack of external validation. The core message extends beyond the nature of a parent's profession or the perceived grandeur of their role. It centers on the lessons we impart to our children, not through spoken words, but through demonstrable actions. Affirming your child instills resilience. Consistently supporting them cultivates bravery. Even a brief moment in a crowded room, standing near them, demonstrates what it truly means to be heard. When a child experiences being seen, not only by a teacher or a classmate, but by the wider world, they cease to diminish their presence. They stop doubting themselves. They begin to carry themselves with the confidence of someone who has something significant to contribute. Because they do. Talia no longer needed to persuade anyone. She wasn't waiting for the class to accept her. She had already moved forward, now concentrating on what she thought achievable. This is what makes narratives like hers significant. Because for each child who has been ridiculed, overlooked, or interrupted, there's another opportunity awaiting. A moment when the door opens, when the badge is displayed, when silence transforms into respect, and it remains with them. At the conclusion of the school year, when the class created their memory book, a page was designated most likely to. Beneath Talia's photograph, a message read, seemingly with the intention of sending something into space. She reacted with a smile, not due to the coolness of the statement, but because this time it appeared to be genuine. Therefore, the next time a child expresses a significant aspiration, refrain from immediate skepticism. Avoid limiting their potential to your current understanding. Allow them to surpass your expectations. And for parents observing this, be present, even when it feels challenging, particularly when it's truly important. Vocalize your belief in them. For more stories like this, please subscribe. These are stories that highlight true strength. Judge Holbrook and those present in the courtroom initially believed she was merely a disoriented elderly woman. However, she quietly presented her bar card and systematically refuted the case before their eyes. Do you comprehend the charges against you? Or should we proceed more deliberately? Judge Morris Holbrook's tone held a barely concealed hint of amusement. He reclined in his high-backed chair, folded his arms, and looked down at the elderly woman standing alone at the defense table. His voice held the same condescension he directed at blustering defendants who believed they could best him in argument. However, this wasn't a volatile young person with loose trousers and a defiant manner. This was a 72-year-old woman wearing a pale blue cardigan and sturdy orthopedic shoes, standing upright with her hands softly clasped over a well-worn leather handbag. Alma Vernice Whitaker faced charges of obstruction, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest stemming from a protest 2 weeks prior at Bakersfield City Hall. Leland Drury, the prosecutor, appeared to be no older than 30, presenting a polished image with shiny shoes and a demeanor suggesting unwavering self-assurance. He briefly looked towards the gallery, a slight grin on his face. A few individuals in the courtroom suppressed quiet laughter. The bailiff emitted a chuckle. A flicker moved across the stenographer's lips. Alma remained silent. Judge Holbrook struck the file before him. The document stated that he had pushed an officer and incited the crowd to defy orders to leave. Such bold claims from a person of his stature. A fresh ripple of laughter spread through the room. The judge peered over his spectacles towards her. He noted the absence of legal counsel. No attorney, I presume? She then spoke, her voice calm and measured. No, Your Honor, Alma replied, a statement that visibly startled Leland. His head angled as if he hadn't understood. Madam, are you aware this is a criminal proceeding? You are facing genuine charges. Alma did not react. I am fully aware. Would you like to see my bar card? A moment of silence followed. Then some laughter arose, people assuming she meant something else. However, Alma slowly reached into her handbag and produced a laminated card, somewhat yellowed around the edges. She positioned it carefully on the table and pushed it across. Albrook peered, then leaned in. It displayed State Bar of California. Attorney Alma V. Whitaker, bar number 129804, was admitted on June 17, 1983. The room fell silent. She looked up and adjusted her reading glasses. I received my law degree from Howard in 1982, passed the bar the following summer, spent 12 years as a public defender in Detroit, and another 8 years working civil rights cases here in California, she stated. No one moved. I retired in 2003, she added, but I have kept my license active just in case. Judge Albrook shifted in his seat. Drury cleared his throat, but said nothing. Alma addressed the judge directly. Before this courtroom determines my fate, I need to clarify some information. I was not organizing a protest. I was attempting to de-escalate it. There is a distinction, and I plan to demonstrate it. Point by point, her tone remained consistent. She did not increase her volume, but each word appeared deliberate and considered. The bailiff looked towards the judge. Albrook examined her bar card once more, flipping it over, seeming to anticipate it might disintegrate. Alma remained motionless, as if she had held that posture countless times, and she had. Leland Drury then spoke, his voice slightly strained. Your Honor, we cannot confirm this without official. It's authentic, and I have additional documentation in this bag if needed, Alma stated, interrupting. Drury stopped speaking. Judge Albrook paused, then concluded very well. The court acknowledges the defendant is representing herself. He then paused. A subtle murmur, a sense of bewilderment, rippled through the gallery. But Alma Whitaker offered only a slight, almost unnoticeable acknowledgement to herself. Her purpose wasn't to provide amusement. It was to underscore that appearances could be deceiving. However, Judge Albrook wasn't prepared for the revelation she was about to unveil. The courtroom still hadn't fully settled. Judge Albrook now sat with a more upright posture, observing Alma Whitaker with a different kind of focus, one devoid of irony. Leland Drury, who previously appeared relaxed, now seemed uncertain whether he's entered a genuine trial or a trap. His jaw was tight, but his eyes repeatedly looked at the judge as if anticipating support. Alma made adjustments to the microphone before her. I'd like to begin by addressing the prosecution's claims, beginning with the body cam footage. Or more specifically, the lack of it, Leland said. Your Honor, the official report indicates the footage from Officer Grunwald's body camera was deemed irrelevant because of a battery malfunction. This malfunction occurred precisely from the moment the officers arrived at the protest until I was placed in cuffs. She turned slightly toward the jury. It's a significant gap in the record, isn't it? She moved slowly, considering her words, much like lawyers sometimes do. However, this wasn't a performance, it was a genuine issue. According to the arrest report, 3 officers were involved, she stated. Only one officer's body camera footage was examined. The second one had malfunctioned, and the third officer's footage was, what did the report indicate? It wasn't uploaded due to an administrative error. She paused before the jury box and folded her hands. However, the report did include complete transcripts of what I purportedly said, without any accompanying audio. Judge Holbrook turned to Drury. Mr. Drury, is that an accurate representation? Drury cleared his throat. We presented the available materials, Your Honor. The lack of video recording does not invalidate the officer's testimony under oath. Alma didn't wait. Then we should discuss that testimony. Officer Grunewald stated I raised my fist, shouted push forward, and resisted arrest by locking my arms with another protester. I have provided 6 witness statements contradicting this. Each witness was present. They all confirm I positioned myself between the crowd and the police and requested people to move backward. Drury retrieved a folder from her bag and placed it on the table. She also stated a request had been submitted for a subpoena of Officer Grunewald's prior complaints, noting there were 3 related to misconduct during public gatherings, all of which had been dismissed quietly. A ripple of reaction passed through the gallery. Drury raised an objection. She questioned the relevance, asking if the complaints had resulted in a conviction. Alma turned, her voice firm, asserting that a pattern of behavior matters, particularly when it's the same behavior repeated. The judge raised a hand to quiet the room. Please focus, Ms. Whitaker. She nodded once, then presented a second document. I also want to discuss the photograph the prosecution introduced as evidence. Exhibit C, the image depicting me mid-step, encircled by police officers. She displayed the printout. The prosecution asserted this indicated I was advancing towards the officers, seemingly ready to oppose arrest. However, if you examine it closely, she provided a magnified copy to the clerk. You'll observe my palms are raised, open, directed outwards. This is a widely recognized gesture of de-escalation. She looked at the jury again. One doesn't approach armed police with raised hands unless attempting to avert a greater harm. The room was silent. There was no laughter now. Even the gallery had leaned forward. Drury attempted to regain control. Despite those gestures, the defendant disregarded a legal instruction to leave. Alma turned to him slowly. What legal instruction, Mr. Drury? The arrest record details an order issued by Officer Grunewald at 6:32 p.m. A time-stamped photo demonstrated that I was already in restraints by 6:28. She paused, allowing that information to register. This suggested the order was either issued belatedly or wasn't given at all. Judge Holbrook moved, appearing noticeably uneasy. Leland remained silent. Alma inhaled deeply. Therefore, considering the absence of audio recordings, the conflicting timeline, the missing video, and the testimony that disputes witness accounts, what remains to support prosecution? She did not appear self-satisfied. She expressed no sense of triumph. She seemed weary. Weary, as if she's faced this scenario countless times and understood the process intimately. Alma then introduced a surprising element, video evidence that fundamentally altered the case. She placed a small USB drive across the table, explaining that it contained footage recorded by a college student, Victor Ramirez. He had been filming from the second floor of the parking garage, overlooking City Hall. I've already submitted it to the clerk for review, Judge Holbrook observed. What does this video depict? Alma responded directly. The clerk placed the drive into the court screen system. A grainy yet stable video appeared on the monitor. It showed the protest happening below. People were shouting and holding signs, while police officers created a barricade. Then, Alma became visible, her small figure moving through the crowd. She was not shouting. She did not raise her fists. She did not link arms or chant. She was waving her hands down in a motion recognizable to anyone who had previously broken up a fight. Back up! Her voice rang out, surprisingly loud and clear for a woman her age. Don't push, stay calm. The video captured the entire incident. She positioned herself between 2 officers and a group of teenagers holding cardboard signs. She faced the crowd, not the police. Her hands were raised, again palms outward. Shortly after, one officer lunged. Another joined in. They seized her arms, pulled her backward, and placed handcuffs on her. She offered no resistance. She displayed no reaction. The room was completely silent. Following an additional 30 seconds of footage, the screen faded to black. Alma addressed Judge Holbrook. The officer's report stated that I charged the barrier, urging others to defy. However, in that video, I was the sole individual attempting to prevent the situation from worsening. That video was not presented by the prosecution, despite Officer Grunewald's knowledge of its existence. According to information, Victor provided a copy to the department the day following the protest. He received no response. Holbrook glanced at the bench, his jaw tense. Mr. Drury was asked, "Did your office receive this footage?" Leland Drury's face appeared pale. He stated, "I was not informed, Your Honor." Alma did not look at him. It wasn't necessary. Mr. Ramirez reported that he provided it to a plainclothes officer, who informed him it wasn't required. He speculated that they had already determined their version of events. A woman in the gallery murmured, "Lord have mercy." The judge's gavel fell once, a gentle sound intended to restore order. He regarded Alma as if encountering her anew. "You stated you retired in 2003? She affirmed, "That is correct." Following 20 years of observing cases similar to this, he inclined his body forward. "And why return now?" Her tone became gentler. "Because I grew weary of awaiting another person's concern." She advanced several steps, not for effect, but because remaining seated was no longer possible. "I had hoped that if I simply adhered to the guidelines, remained quiet in retirement, read the paper, and offered occasional assistance, perhaps the world would resolve itself. However, the reality is that Mr. Drury's actions aren't unprecedented. Officer Grunewald's behavior isn't new. This pattern, this tendency of accusing first, investigating later, that's not a recent development. I'm familiar with it. I've observed it since I was 30 years old, and it hasn't diminished." She addressed the jury, her gaze sweeping across the panel. "I didn't come here today to create a spectacle. I am here because if this court determines my guilt relying on the testimony of individuals who are not entirely truthful, then what becomes of the next person lacking supporting evidence, or a recorded statement, or the courage to come forward?" There was no response. Even Drury had become completely still. Judge Holbrook leaned back slowly in his chair, but just as the situation seemed as dire as it could be for the prosecution, Alma brought the room to a complete standstill. Alma reached into her handbag once more, carefully and deliberately, and produced a folded document. It appeared unassuming, lacking a prominent legal stamp or highlighted sections, simply a standard police transcript printed on regular letter paper. "I'd like to read something into the record," she stated calmly, from Officer Timothy Bragg, who was present that afternoon but not called as a witness. Judge Holbrook scrutinized her. "Was this statement presented to the court prior to today?" Alma responded, shaking her head once. "It was not. I received this document yesterday through a records request. The process was challenging and required me to call upon a few previous obligations." She flattened the paper and began reading. "I arrived on scene at approximately 6:15 p.m. I observed Alma Whitaker moving through the crowd, repeatedly telling people to step back and remain peaceful. I did not witness her shout aggressively, or instigate. When I saw her being taken into custody, I was surprised, as she was the only individual I observed attempting to calm tensions." She glanced upward, allowing the quiet to linger. Leland Drury adjusted his position in his chair. His fingers momentarily played with a pen. "That officer was not involved in the arrest. Does that mean his account is unreliable?" Alma completed his thought, her voice now more pointed. "Then why wasn't his name mentioned in the witness list provided by your office, not even as an addendum? You state your pursuit is of the facts, Mr. Drury, yet the facts that dispute your narrative are discreetly omitted." The judge asked, "Mr. Drury, can you confirm whether Officer Bragg was interviewed during the investigation?" Drury paused. I'd have to check the original intake file." "There's no need," Alma stated. "I verified. He submitted his statement the night of the arrest." It was signed, time-stamped, and remained unreviewed, unmentioned. She approached the jury once more. This case was never about disorder. The aim was to make an illustration of an individual who appeared harmless but refused to conform. She indicated softly towards the screen, which remained dark from the preceding video. They hadn't anticipated someone like me would speak, and after I did, they attempted to characterize me as disruptive. That term is employed when people are reluctant to acknowledge their discomfort with being questioned. A juror, a man in his 60s with a neatly trimmed beard, massaged the bridge of his nose and glanced downward. The others watched Alma intently, their attention complete. Judge Holbrook appeared weary, not due to Alma, but because of the situation unfolding before him. Your Honor, she spoke quietly. I request that all charges be dismissed based on procedural misconduct, incomplete evidence submission, and the suppression of exculpatory testimony. The judge remained silent for a moment. He clasped his hands and looked at the bench, tapping one finger in a steady beat. The courtroom held its breath. Alma remained silent. It wasn't necessary. Eventually, Holbrook raised his head. I will consider the request and reconvene following a brief pause, he stated. Alma acknowledged his words with a nod and returned to her place. Her hands were firm. There were no written notes, no additional legal representatives, no elaborate ceremony, only years of practice, and a resolute conviction that truth held significance, even when others were unwilling to acknowledge it. As the courtroom cleared for recess, Leland Drury hesitated before rising. He remained in his seat, appearing as someone who had just understood they'd brought a spoon to a gunfight. When Judge Holbrook attempted to regain control of the proceedings, Alma took an action that quieted the entire room. Upon resuming, the atmosphere had noticeably changed. The laughter and knowing comments had disappeared. Even those in the gallery sat more upright and silently, as if drawn into something more serious than anyone anticipated. Judge Holbrook returned, his face grave. The gavel struck once, a gesture seemingly perfunctory, and then Alma rose. She avoided legal terminology and refrained from raising her voice. She simply began to speak. There was a period, she started, when I would hurry into courtrooms carrying 20 case files, often repeating the same suit 3 times a week due to financial limitations. This occurred in 1987, in Detroit, at the Public Defender's office on East Grand Boulevard. Her voice remained steady, yet it carried an underlying sense of weight. I recall representing a 17-year-old, Ronaldo Briggs, who had been arrested because he fit the description of a purse snatcher. He was on his way home from school, carrying a trumpet case. The officer stated that he appeared nervous. One understands what nervous signifies when you are young, black, and walking alone. The courtroom was silent. The prosecution presented no purse, no eyewitness testimony, and no confession. The only evidence was that he attempted to flee when 2 officers emerged from an unmarked van. I paused, allowing my statement to resonate. The legal proceedings lasted 5 weeks. For 5 weeks, I sifted through evidence that others had discarded. I found a receipt for a school lunch inside his backpack, showing a timestamp 10 minutes prior to the crime. The police were dismissed from the case. By then, however, Ronaldo had missed his final band competition and lost his scholarship. Not to inflict blame, but to offer a tangible and lasting message. Cases like his remained with me, not because they were unusual, but because they occurred frequently. Too frequently. She inhaled deeply, centering herself. Do you believe I am here today because I enjoy conflict? Because I long for the extended hours and limited tolerance common in courtrooms such as this? She addressed Judge Holbrook, her tone calm. No, Your Honor, I am here because an unacceptable number of individuals like Ronaldo do not receive a second opportunity. Had I remained silent, had I simply departed when the protest began to escalate, another child might have occupied this seat, a child unable to advocate for themselves. She moved nearer to the bench. I'm weary of feigning that quiet ensures our security. Holbrook's hands were now clasped, his knuckles pale against the wood of the bench. He remained silent. He appeared as though he desired to speak. Alma redirected her gaze toward Drury. You're young? She asked him without harshness. Perhaps you still believe the system is equitable until demonstrated otherwise. However, that's inaccurate. The system is imperfect until someone insists on something superior. That's the duty. If you are unwilling to accept that responsibility, then this is not the appropriate venue, Drury said, his face reddening. He remained silent, unable to answer. Alma went back to her place. The quiet persisted. After a minute, Judge Holbrook made a sound as he cleared his throat and looked toward the clerk. But first he touched his forehead, as if the past was suddenly heavy upon him as well. He began to speak, then stopped. This wasn't for effect. It was simply a moment of hesitation. He appeared, for the first time in years, like a man questioning the words before him. I have examined the evidence presented by the defense, he stated finally, referencing the witness video, the police transcript, and the timing discrepancies. His voice faltered but subtly. This case was not managed appropriately, and it is the court's view that proceeding would be unfair. The courtroom was utterly silent. Ms. Whitaker, he said, his tone now more strained, this court dismisses all charges. A hush fell. There were no cheers, no vocal reactions, just a stunned silence, as if people were waiting for direction on how to respond. Alma did not smile. She closed her bag, rose, and nodded. This was not a gesture of triumph, but of respect. At that moment, Judge Holbrook, for the first time in years, found himself speechless. Within the courthouse, the sunlight streamed in, bright, dry, and sharp, much as it always did in Bakersfield around noon. Alma descended the courthouse stairs deliberately, not due to any physical weakness, but because she understood the value of savoring significant moments. She held her handbag securely beneath one arm, the soles of her shoes making a quiet sound against the pavement. Journalists waited expectantly on the sidewalk, their cameras already recording, microphones extended like lures. Many of them hadn't been present when the trial commenced. News had circulated regarding the retired black woman who entered the courtroom unaccompanied and emerged with the truth. Ms. Whitaker, are you considering legal action against the city? Did you anticipate the case's dismissal? Do you identify as an activist? She remained silent, not to evade attention, but because she had already spoken her piece, and that courtroom had been her sole intended audience. A small group of people waited for her at the foot of the steps. They weren't journalists. They were younger, late teens, perhaps early 20s, wearing hoodies, carrying backpacks, and sporting worn sneakers. Alma recognized one of them as Victor Ramirez, the student who had filmed the video. He kept his phone lowered, no longer recording, simply observing her. A young woman moved forward. She appeared to be just out of high school, her eyes bright and nervous. Ms. Whitaker, she said, I hope to be a lawyer someday, like you. Alma smiled for the first time all day. She offered a small smile, indicating her attention. The girl continued, that was the first time I saw someone actually win in court like that. You didn't just fight. You taught. Alma met her gaze directly. Then remember what you saw, because it won't always look that way. Most days it'll feel like pushing a brick wall uphill with your bare hands, and no one will applaud you. But you push anyway. Victor then spoke. The system had never anticipated someone like you possessing the ability to retaliate. I understand, she replied softly. They relied on it. A different boy interjected, could we learn from you? Perhaps by observing you closely, or conducting an interview, or something similar. You've witnessed events we've only read about. Alma surveyed the group, hesitating. She didn't aspire to be anyone's rescuer, yet she detected something within their gazes she hadn't observed in a considerable time. Hope intertwined with impatience. That familiar intensity. She straightened the handle of her bag. I avoid social media platforms. While I don't maintain a website, I still retain the ability to teach. Please bring your questions, and I'll provide the coffee. The group responded with quiet laughter. Victor's eyes lit up. Behind them, Judge Holbrook stood at the top of the stairs, observing everything. He was not accompanied by deputies at this time. He wore a blazer and a loose tie instead of a robe. For a brief moment, he seemed poised to speak, but then he remained silent. He observed Alma disappear around the corner with the children, her form gradually diminishing in the late afternoon sunlight. Returning inside, Leland Drury remained at his desk, his case file spread out but unexamined. His demeanor had altered. The usual self-satisfaction was absent. The characteristic severity softened. He looked at Alma's bar card resting on the bench, momentarily overlooked. Then, he reached for it, not to challenge it, but to review it. That name, that date, that accumulation of experience. The courtroom stood deserted now, yet something had changed within him. Perhaps not enough to alter everything immediately, but potentially enough to make him reconsider in the future. For the first time, he had witnessed the distinction between winning a case and truly comprehending justice. However, what Alma subsequently conveyed to those kids provided them with something beyond legal counsel. It offered them a foundation for hope. The diner on Union Avenue was nearly empty when Alma sat down with the kids that evening. She selected the booth by the window, the very one she'd occupied years ago when she used to meet with apprehensive clients who lacked confidence in courtrooms. The light from the setting sun illuminated the worn leather seats and transformed the Formica table a warm, golden hue. Victor requested coffee, despite not typically consuming it. The young woman, identified as Kenya, asked for iced tea and retrieved a notebook, already filled with notes. The remaining individuals positioned themselves closer, as if witnessing a solemn event. Alma didn't begin a lecture. She stirred her cup deliberately, then remarked, "You know the first thing they teach you in law school?" Victor blinked. "The Constitution?" She smiled faintly. "No, they teach you how to read a case file without getting emotional, how to separate the fact from the feelings, how to argue without letting it get under your skin." Kenya leaned forward. "Is that a good thing?" "It's necessary," Alma said, "but dangerous, too. The tendency to overlook the individuals behind the data can be insidious. It's easy to lose sight of the human element." She paused, setting her spoon down and meeting their gazes. "Remember the people." A quiet stillness settled over the group, not awkward but contemplative. One of the boys, previously silent, then voiced a question. "But how does one continue when there's no audience?" Alma released a slow breath, feeling the gravity of that inquiry. "You persist because occasionally someone is paying attention. They will only grasp the truth if it's spoken aloud, even when your voice trembles, even when the atmosphere chills." Kenya jotted notes rapidly in her notebook, but Alma countered, "Don't record this. Experience it. Make errors. Botch it, but maintain your integrity." Victor reclined in the booth. "Do you ever question it?" Remaining engaged for this duration, Alma hesitated. Her fingers followed the edge of her cup. "The loss of each client who deserved to be released weighed on me. Witnessing officers fabricate stories without hesitation caused me regret. And observing juries prioritize ease over honesty often made me question the value of my efforts." She paused, gazing out the window, but then I recalled the individuals who were ultimately freed, those whose voices were amplified, those who contacted me 5 years later simply to express gratitude. That is what truly holds significance. Victor nodded thoughtfully. Alma concluded her coffee and rose. The check had already been taken care of. Kenya had discreetly placed the bills beneath the sugar jar. Standing outside on the sidewalk, the children paused, seeming reluctant for the evening to conclude. Alma addressed them. "Do you want to change the system?" They affirmed. "Then don't merely study it. Challenge it. Pose more insightful questions. Confront the absence of discussion. Engage your intellect. Utilize your mobility. Employ your writing. And when someone advises you to wait your turn, inquire as to their reasoning for believing it's not your turn already." Kenya wiped her eyes. The others remained silent, observing her intently. Then Alma spoke a final statement. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to be quiet." Following this, she proceeded towards the bus stop without turning back. Some stories transcend sensational news. They serve as reminders. That authority isn't consistently found in ceremonial garments or official positions, nor does it originate from the most vocal individual. Occasionally, it originates from a woman wearing a cardigan, managing the system as if she's performed this task previously. Because she has. When people inquire about the appearance of justice, they should recall her name, Alma Vernice Whitaker. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who would benefit from hearing it. And if you agree that wisdom isn't dictated by attire, please subscribe to hear more authentic stories that help us understand ourselves. A white student believed it would be amusing to shear a black student's hair in front of onlookers, but the reserved new student he targeted proved to possess a unique form of resilience. 13-year-old Tyrese Reddick requested little when he entered Crest Hill Middle School that Monday morning in Thousand Oaks, California. He carried his backpack, a well-used spiral notebook, and the same lunchbox he'd been using since 5th grade. His mom had written a brief message inside, as she always did, "Be yourself." That was sufficient. Tyrese felt no nervousness. He's experienced being the new student previously. 3 schools within the past 5 years, a consequence of his dad's work assisting military veterans transition to civilian life. This one didn't seem significantly different. Bright hallways, worn lockers, that familiar scratchy intercom crackle each morning. However, even before second period, he could sense the nature of this place. Students observed him. Not everyone, but a noticeable number. The long locks, carefully twisted and pulled back, distinguished him. He carried himself with quiet confidence. He avoided ostentation, opting for a simple style, clean sneakers, a tucked-in shirt, and earbuds during the bus ride. Yet, his presence was noted. In Mrs. Lamar's history class, a girl with freckles whispered, "Your hair's cool." He responded with a small, appreciative nod, but remained silent. Afterward, in the cafeteria, he located an unoccupied table close to the vending machine. He was comfortable with solitude. He enjoyed watching initially, noting who laughed excessively, who moved in groups, who acted differently than they truly were. A definite pattern existed. Crest Hill operated with unwritten guidelines. There were the drama students, the sports teams, those who wore costly hoodies and spoke as if they were online personalities. And then there were those who maintained order, deciding who held significance. He noticed one of them before the 6th period began. He was tall, blonde, and boisterous, conversing with a group by the lockers, and they were all laughing excessively at something. Therese hadn't learned the boy's name yet, but he observed how other students either displayed overly enthusiastic smiles around him or avoided eye contact. Individuals of that nature were consistently the same, those who required an audience. Therese continued walking. Upon arriving home that afternoon, he placed his bag near the kitchen door. His mother was preparing red beans and rice, humming softly. "How was your first day?" she asked without turning from the stove. He shrugged. "Same as usual." "Did you make any friends?" she inquired. "Not yet." His father, seated at the table in a pressed polo, looked up from his tablet. "Are people staring?" he asked. Therese paused. "Don't hesitate to address it," his dad said, his voice even. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, but you also won't allow them to take advantage of you. Do you understand?" Therese nodded. "Yeah. You're not attending that school simply to endure it. You are there to command your presence, silent if you desire, vocal if you select, but never allow anyone to define you based on their assumptions." His dad expressed himself in that manner often, not through formal talks, but through subtle guidance, valuable insights woven into the aroma of coffee or while tending to his boots in the garage. Therese paid close attention. He consistently listened. The following morning, as he secured his hair back in the mirror, he reflected on his father's words. He didn't need to create a disturbance. He simply needed to be dependable. However, even dependability couldn't prevent a storm from developing. Within the first week, Therese understood the social dynamics well. Crest Hill wasn't overtly unfriendly, but it had its nuances, those subtle cues that revealed the power structure. And centrally positioned within that was Brent Granger. Brent wasn't the largest student, but he carried himself as if he were. His dad owned and operated Granger Buick GMC, a car dealership located off the main highway, and it was well known throughout town. He habitually wore his hoodie halfway off his shoulders, kept his socks pulled up high, and had a knack for transforming every classroom into his own personal game show. Teachers put up with him. Students either adored him or actively avoided eye contact. There was no middle ground. Tyrese understood this perfectly. Brent wasn't seeking popularity. He wanted to be feared, admired, and followed. He had cultivated this reputation through a deliberate strategy, employing boisterous jokes, harsh nicknames, and ensuring he had an audience whenever he criticized someone. On Wednesday, Tyrese passed the outdoor basketball court during lunch. Brent was present with his group, Logan, Bryce, and Chadwick, all 8th graders, all known for being loud. Chadwick noticed Tyrese first. "Yo, new kid, do you play?" He yelled, spinning a ball on his finger. Tyrese continued walking, his earbuds in. Brent gave a smirk. Was he really spending that much time on his hair? The others chuckled. Tyrese remained unfazed. However, he registered every comment. Later that day, Logan brushed against him in the hallway. "Oops," he stated matter-of-factly, without acknowledging him. It wasn't accidental, it was a challenge. That night, Tyrese sat on the back porch with his dad, an ice pack on his knee. He'd received a hard elbow during P basketball. It was the same group, insufficient for a formal report, but enough to send a message. His dad looked at him, but remained silent initially. "I'm good," Tyrese stated. "I know you are," his father responded. But being good isn't the same as being ready. Ready for what? Tyrese pondered. He didn't desire to be the angry child. He didn't want to be a target, either. He simply wanted to be left undisturbed. However, individuals like Brent tend to recognize those who are reserved. They test and provoke, anticipating a vulnerability. And Tyrese? He remained steadfast. He was carefully considering his actions. Friday arrived. It was gym class time. The locker room before the bell consistently held a peculiar atmosphere, a combination of boisterous energy and the scent of deodorant. Tyrese was securing his shoelaces when Brent entered late, holding a pair of scissors. "New kid?" Brent called out across the room. "Did your mom forget to give you a haircut?" Tyrese remained silent, continuing to tie his shoes. "Man, you're sporting a whole jungle on your head." Several students laughed. A few appeared awkward, but offered no comment. Then Brent approached. He held the scissors in one hand, mimicking a playful gesture, waving them around. "Just saying, bro, you'd probably make a whole wig with what you got." Tyrese finally looked up, maintaining a calm demeanor, his eyes steady. He appeared neither scared nor angry, but completely focused. "You good?" Tyrese asked, his voice low. Brent blinked. "What?" "I said, are you good?" Brent stared at him, momentarily disoriented. "You talk now," he snapped, attempting to regain his composure. "Man, whatever." He turned and left, discarding the scissors into a locker as if they held no significance. Yet, Tyrese understood the gesture. It was a display of dominance, a deliberate act. Brent, however, was unprepared for the consequences when the pretense ended. By the start of the second week, a change was palpable. It wasn't overt, nothing that could be documented in an official reprimand. Still, Tyrese sensed it. Entering class, he noticed subtle looks. Not fear, not interest, simply observation. A posture of expectation, as if everyone anticipated a confrontation. He preferred to avoid entanglement. Within Mr. Delano's science lab, he heard a student whisper, "That's the person Brent is involved with." During lunchtime, another student subtly shifted their tray when Tyrese took a seat at the table's end. He remained composed, neither adjusting his position nor expressing any reaction. He simply ate more slowly. One afternoon, while on his way to the library, a 7th grader, a slender boy with braces, approached him near the vending machines. "Hey," the boy said, slightly winded, "are you Tyrese?" Tyrese looked over. He cautioned, "Just, be careful around Brent. He's been speaking about you." Said he intends to make a statement. Tyrese questioned that. "A point?" His companion confirmed, "Yes. He says you believe you're superior to everyone. He's planning to correct you." The young man paused before adding, "He did something to a 6th grader last year. He poured milkshake on his head during lunch." Everyone laughed. It was quite disturbing. Tyrese acknowledged with a nod. "Thank you." The boy appeared to want to add something, but someone called his name, and he ran off. That evening, Tyrese lay on the living room rug, feet resting on the couch, looking at his phone. His mom was close by, checking papers. Something on your mind? She asked without looking up. He hesitated. Have you ever had someone harass you just to see you react? She set down her pen and turned to him. You mean like bullying? I mean like they notice you don't join their games, so they force you into one. She paused, allowing the words to linger. I've encountered individuals like that before, she remarked. In college, even during my first teaching job, some people struggle to grasp peace unless it aligns with their expectations. He responded, you maintain your principles. You acknowledge your identity, and you refuse to allow others to compromise your stability. He nodded in agreement. His father entered the room, wiping his hands with a towel. Do you wish to speak with me? He inquired directly. Tyrese observed them both, then straightened up. I thought, his dad said, settling into the chair opposite him. Is that the boisterous one? Yes. What is he doing? Nothing yet. Just comments. Bumping into me. Talking as if he's seeking a reaction. Is it effective? Tyrese shook his head. No, but it's becoming tiresome. His father leaned forward. Let me tell you something, he said. The world is full of kids like Brent. It doesn't matter if you're 13 or 30. Some of them have loud voices. Some wear uniforms. Some hide behind keyboards. They all behave similarly. They test and challenge you, attempting to provoke a reaction, either a rash response or retreat, he indicated by tapping his finger on the coffee table. You refrain from either action. You remain composed until they acknowledge they're confronting an unexpected challenge. Tyrese looked at him. Can I strike him? He inquired. If necessary, his dad replied, but not fueled by anger. Never out of anger. You strike to halt the behavior, not to dominate. His mother remained silent, but offered no disagreement either. The following day, Brent passed Tyrese in the hallway and bumped his books from his hand. The papers spread out, fluttering across the tile. Brent smiled, a seemingly accidental gesture. Tyrese bent down, gathering them up individually. Several students paused to observe. Others looked away. Brent remained, waiting. When Tyrese straightened, he remained silent. He simply stared, a prolonged gaze that made Brent blink. What? Tyrese spoke, his tone even, just enough to convey, I see you. I am not afraid of you, and I am not responding as you instructed. Brent's smile disappeared. However, some individuals require explicit clarification, detailed step by step. It was gym day once again, and the locker room was filled with typical middle school activity. Sneakers scraping against the floor, lockers banging, the sound of inexpensive deodorant spraying permeating the space. Tyrese consistently prepared quickly. He entered and exited swiftly, avoiding conversation, showing off, or joking. He approached it as a task. When he entered, Brent was already present, seated on the bench as if expecting someone. It seemed he was the observer now. Tyrese remained composed, located his locker, entered the combination, and concentrated on changing. He sensed eyes on him, not just Brent's, but others as well. Logan, Bryce, and Chadwick. Even some students who typically stayed out of things. Yo, Brent said, rising deliberately. You still rocking those spaghetti ropes on your head? A faint sound, like laughter, rippled through the room, but it lacked strength, as if even amusement had become weary. Tyrese concentrated on his shoes, securing the laces firmly. Brent approached. He retrieved an object from his pocket. Scissors, silver, sharp, and genuine, likely taken from an art class or workshop. Have you ever considered change? Brent inquired, manipulating the scissors with 2 fingers as if they were a plaything. It could tidy you up. You might actually appear normal. Tyrese raised his gaze, his face blank, without a flicker of movement. Brent smiled. Before anyone could intervene, he reached out and cut. A moment of dread. The cut was clean at the base. It fell to the floor like a fallen leaf. Several children gasped. One whispered, yo. For a brief instant, everything paused. Tyrese rose, steadily, without haste, without hesitation. His expression remained unchanged, but something shifted behind his eyes. He looked down at the dread on the floor. Then he looked up at Brent. You think this is amusing? He asked. Brent smirked, slightly. Tyrese did not shout. He did not lash out. He advanced, composed, deliberate, and struck Brent with a quick elbow to the chest. Brent recoiled, astonished, gasping. Before he could respond, Tyrese intervened once more. Rotation, sweep, ascent. Brent fell heavily to the ground, without flourish, without ostentation, simply efficient motion. His father had instructed him in that. Accuracy, not force. Brent attempted to rise. Tyrese positioned a knee on his chest and moved in close. "You do not touch me again," he stated. Voice even. Never. The room was utterly silent. It was documented. Naturally, Coach Timmons entered the room just 2 seconds afterward. Tyrese signaled, using a whistle as if they were on a football field. "Hey, what's happening?" Tyrese retreated. Brent was on the floor, one hand pressed to his ribs, the other still holding the scissors. Coach addressed both boys. "Office now." The journey to the principal's office was quiet. Tyrese remained silent. Brent attempted to portray himself as the injured party, murmuring about his intentions and claiming it was merely a joke, his hands visibly shaking. Principal Rossner observed them, her expression stern behind her square glasses. "Begin speaking," she instructed. Brent spoke first, attributing the incident to Tyrese, asserting that he reacted inexplicably and it was a misunderstanding. Tyrese remained silent, patiently waiting. Subsequently, he retrieved an item from his pocket and placed it on the desk, a cut dread. He maintained direct eye contact with Principal Rossner. "He brought scissors to school." Rossner blinked as he cut my hair. Her face remained still, though her eyes shifted. She then turned to Brent. "Is that true?" Brent stammered. "It was a joke. I wasn't going to actually—" "You cut his hair?" No response was given. "I want your parents here." "Now." Coach Timmons stood behind them, arms crossed, silent. 20 minutes later, Tyrese's mom arrived, entering calmly, but with firmness. She sat next to her son, placed a hand on his shoulder, and looked the principal directly in the face. "Before we say a word," she stated, "I want to know if you all understand what this means." Rossner exhaled slowly. "We're handling it." "You better." But the truth was, this wasn't just a school issue anymore. It was bigger, and it wasn't going away quietly. By that evening, the video had already started making its rounds. It wasn't a long clip, just 10 seconds, but it showed everything. Brent moved forward with scissors. Tyrese advanced, executing a takedown. Following that, there was a close-up shot of Tyrese leaning in, appearing composed and resolute. The quietness in the locker room spoke volumes. The incident spread through group chats and Instagram stories. Even a few students from Northwood High School shared it with captions such as "He messed with the wrong one," and "Brent got folded." Tyrese made no posts about it. He offered no comments. He felt no need to. His parents were seated at the kitchen table, facing Principal Rossner and Brent's parents, Dean and Colleen Granger. Dean was wearing an expensive watch and a blazer with jeans. Colleen had sunglasses resting on her head, as if she had just left the country club brunch. "Let's be clear," Dean stated, attempting to take charge of the discussion. "Our son made a mistake, but it was simply a prank. Boys his age do not always grasp boundaries. Cutting someone's hair is assault." Tyrese's mother responded, her tone sharp. "Not a prank." Dean questioned the situation. Tyrese's dad moved closer. "Let me explain, man. I served in the Marines. I've led squads in countries you couldn't find on a map. You know what isn't tolerated, regardless of location? Disrespect, particularly when it's masked with explanations." Colleen moved in her seat. "We're just suggesting that maybe your son reacted excessively." Tyrese's mom slowly turned toward her. "Repeat that." "I'm just saying. Perhaps a less forceful approach would have been preferable." Brent did not inflict any physical harm. Cutting a child's hair without permission is a humiliating act, Rossner finally stated. Regardless of Brent's intentions, the effect is the same. "And if it had been your son's hair, Mrs. Granger, I doubt you'd view it as humorous," Dean said, folding his arms. "So what's the next step? Will Brent be suspended?" "He's suspended for 10 days, Rossner replied directly. "And, subject to the school board's review, we might consider a longer suspension," Dean remarked. Regarding the incident, Rossner stated it was about bringing a weapon into the school, targeting another student, and provoking violence, not over a haircut. Tyrese remained silent throughout the entire discussion, his hands in his lap and his posture upright. He displayed no signs of gloating or smirking. Outside the room, several students observed through the glass door. News of the event had quickly circulated. The following day at school, Tyrese walked the hallway as he typically did, but a noticeable change was present. Some students acknowledged him with nods. Several people simply moved aside to let him pass. A seventh grader approached and exclaimed, "Yo, that thing you did was crazy." Tyrese continued walking. He had no desire for attention and just wanted to get to class. During math, Logan and Chadwick remained silent, offering no jokes or taunts. Brent's group had dispersed. Lacking their leader, they didn't behave as they usually did. Tyrese took his seat, retrieved his pencil, and began his assignment. That afternoon, as Tyrese left school, a teacher he hadn't known well approached him by the parking lot. "Are you okay?" Tyrese nodded. "I just want you to know what you did. How you handled that. It took strength, not just in the moment, but the way you've carried yourself afterward." "Thanks," Tyrese said. "I'm just trying to keep it steady." The teacher smiled. "That's harder than it looks." But respect earned through silence doesn't fade easily, and Brent was beginning to learn that the hard way. Brent's 10-day suspension felt lengthy for all except him. As he remained at home, restricted and disheartened, the school continued. He had anticipated students would support him, perhaps dismissing the situation as they typically did. However, a shift occurred. Students weren't simply avoiding him. They were discussing him. Murmurs in the hallways, uncomfortable pauses in group chats, videos circulated with captions such as "not so tough now" or "play stupid games." Brent's reputation suffered a significant blow. It fractured. Tyrese continued to be consistently present. Headphones on, locker tidy, assignments completed punctually. He avoided any displays of arrogance or a triumphant demeanor. However, his presence felt more substantial now. Not intimidating, simply resolute, as if he was unyielding. The following week, the school arranged a facilitated meeting between the families, an opportunity to discuss the incident and, at least from the district's perspective, reinstate a conducive learning atmosphere. Tyrese was reluctant to attend. His parents advised him, sometimes the most impactful action is simply being present. And that's what he did. They convened in the counselor's office. It was a small room with a circle of chairs that didn't match. Brent entered with a tense neck and a wounded sense of self. He avoided eye contact with Tyrese. His mother appeared more irritated than regretful. His father wore the familiar smirk, as if he were attending out of duty, not thought. Ms. Harrell, the school counselor, inhaled deeply. "We're not here to revisit what occurred. Our intention is to allow everyone the opportunity to share their feelings and discuss how we can proceed." She addressed Brent. "Would you like to start?" Brent adjusted in his chair. "I was simply joking around. There was no intention behind it." Tyrese remained silent. Brent continued, "I didn't realize it would be such a significant issue." Tyrese's mom raised an eyebrow. She stated that cutting a boy's hair is a deeply personal act, particularly when that hair symbolizes something beyond mere appearance. Brent mumbled, "I wasn't aware of that." Tyrese's father stated, "You didn't care to know. That's the difference." Ms. Harrell then addressed Tyrese, asking, "Would you like to say something?" Tyrese looked up, making eye contact with Brent for the first time in the room. "I didn't come here to fight," he said quietly. "I didn't come here to make friends either. I came here to get through school." Regarding his hair, he added, "That's my business. It's part of me. You touched it like it was yours to joke about." Brent shifted in his seat, remaining silent. "I didn't strike you due to a loss of control," Tyrese explained. "I struck you because you needed to grasp a certain point, and verbal communication wasn't effective." A pause settled over the room. Brent's mother then addressed the group. "We have discussed boundaries with him." "Have we, Brent?" Brent responded with a restrained nod. "Yes." Ms. Harrell added, "Occasionally, consequences provide more valuable lessons than spoken words." She then turned toward Tyrese. "Are you satisfied with the current situation?" Tyrese gave a slight shrug. "I do not require an apology." Brent raised his head. "I do apologize, however." Tyrese observed him, not with the intention of causing Brent discomfort, but to understand his delivery. Frankly, Tyrese didn't detect much substance behind the words. Okay, Tyrese stated finally. Then carry it. Carry what? Brent asked, puzzled. The apology? The lesson? The understanding that not everyone will permit you to belittle them and dismiss it with laughter? Tyrese rose. That's all I needed to say. His parents followed him from the room. In the hallway, his father placed a hand on his shoulder. You didn't fight in that room, he said, but you still reacted. He continued, but the thing about true strength? It doesn't manifest in punches. It shows up in how you choose to leave. A week later, Crest Hill Middle held a school-wide assembly. Officially, the assembly was about respect and accountability, but everyone understood what caused it. Even teachers were discussing the incident in the break room, though no one voiced it directly. A palpable restlessness filled the gym as students, anticipating a standard presentation and hollow words, grew bored. Then, Principal Rossner took a surprising action. She approached the front without a microphone, relying solely on her voice and a confident stride. We're facing a recent event that has prompted us to reflect, she stated, and the room fell silent. I'm not going to repeat the details of what occurred. My purpose is to discuss the underlying causes and chart a course for moving ahead. She refrained from mentioning any individuals. It wasn't necessary. She emphasized, this school is not a place where power is gained through popularity or intimidation. Respect isn't earned by volume or the number of laughs you receive. It's earned through how you treat others. Even when no one was observing, a few students glanced around, some shifted uncomfortably, but others remained focused. Listening. Tyrese was seated near the back. He didn't withdraw. He didn't exaggerate his presence, either. He simply maintained the posture he now adopted as he walked through the hallways, balanced and steady. Following the assembly, several students approached him. You all right, man? One student inquired. Yeah, Tyrese responded. You handled that situation differently than I would have, another student observed. Tyrese simply shrugged. A sense of silent acknowledgement began to replace the previous laughter. Even the faculty noticed. Mr. Delano stopped him following science class and remarked, I hope you're proud of how you conducted yourself. Tyrese smiled and replied, I'm just trying to be steady. The significant event occurred a few days later during art class. Miss Ruiz gave the class a project exploring identity, focusing on self-perception and external perception. She indicated the project could take any form, such as a painting, sculpture, or even a college application. Tyrese created a painting, a portrait of a boy with locks, cropped, and one missing. The depiction wasn't conveying sadness or anger, but rather portraying the boy standing tall amidst a storm, with other figures indistinct in the background. When he shared his work, the class fell silent. I created this, he stated, because occasionally people fail to understand how profoundly something seemingly insignificant can matter. They dismiss it as mere hair or a simple joke, but it holds deeper meaning. It's about what it symbolizes. The room was silent. Miss Ruiz's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. She simply nodded. That day, after school, Brent walked past him in the hallway, unaccompanied, without his usual entourage or any commotion. He offered a brief glance. Not an apology, not a confrontation, just recognition. Tyrese nodded once. Nothing further. It wasn't a close bond, but it was a respectful separation. Returning home that evening, his mom was preparing sweet potatoes in the kitchen. Did the art project go well? She inquired. Better than well, he replied. His dad entered from the garage. Did you receive a response regarding your student council essay? His father asked. Yes, Tyrese confirmed, smiling. You're accepted, his father said, pleased. Calmly, proudly. You deserve that, he said. Afterward, as Tyrese prepared for bed, he gazed into the mirror. One section remained noticeably shorter than the others. He hadn't corrected it. He chose to do it this way, not because he lacked the ability, but because it wasn't necessary. It served as a reminder of the challenges he had already overcome, of what didn't break him, of who he was before, during, and after the storm. Because some conflicts aren't about achieving victory. They're about ensuring the subsequent one doesn't unfold in a similar fashion. If this account resonated with you, evoked an emotion, please share it. A lesson can be found within, and perhaps someone in your circle needs to hear it. Join our mailing list for more stories that speak truth, challenge disrespect, and remind us all what quiet strength truly embodies.